But you said now, did you say you were TMing for bands before you doing sound?
Yeah,
And then Caramellos was the first band that gave the chance to do sound.
Yeah, I TM'd for a band called the Fall of Troy in 2000 and I think it was 2007, and I had done like a little bit of like bullshit, sort of like touring with a folk person, helping out, whatever. But I was a kid, so I was just kind of I was tagging along, really, selling merch or doing whatever. But I got a gig tour managing the Fall of Troy in 2007, and that was going to be like a really formative year. I didn't know it at the time, but the short story long of that is that the first tour that I TM'd, Fall of Troy was headlining. Main support was Portugal the Man.
Yeah, I mixed Portugal the Man with that. That was January of 7.
That was the very first show of my very first TM tour.
Okay, wow. So we actually would have met back then. I just don't have a recollection of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was so
18 years ago.
Yeah, so it was so long ago. But yeah, it was January of 2007. Bottom of the Hill was my very first show of my very first gig, that was a great tour. Like, Demira was on that tour, and then Caramellos was the first of 4. I don't think Demira's anymore, but they were out of Buffalo and then later Chicago. And there's people that I know who have played in Demira and have gone on to do other stuff, like Josh Sparks, who plays in Minus the Bear. And I think that maybe somebody from Into It Over It played in Demira as well.
Oh, okay. Those guys at Bottom of the Hill a few years ago.
Yeah, and I can't recall the sort of personnel moves in that band because they had quite a few changes, but they were on that tour, and then Caramellos was on that tour, and so that year I TM'd and I was just TMing, and I was still getting my bearings on that, but I mean it was a tour like every show was like Bottom of the Hill sized, or maybe a little bit bigger, maybe smaller, but a lot of times bigger. And like I think every night was mostly sold out. So and those kids were wild. Like we were all wild at the time. So I was in over my head, So I got a crash course in TMing and budgeting and dragging people by their ear to van call and all that good stuff. But we did that. We did a bunch of like shows with RX Bandits and Horse the Band, and we did a fucking 60-day Deftones tour in sheds and stuff. And then we did like another 70-day Code and Cambria tour. We did a Europe run. We were busy. All this.
When you did those runs, were you on a bus or were you chasing a bus in a van?
We were chasing. Yeah, we were chasing with a van and trailer. So yeah, and like the Deftones stuff, and the Coheed stuff too, but really the Deftones stuff was like, those were hauls. Like we had some big hauls. I didn't know it at the time. I was too young to like know the difference. I had no experience. So like, it was just like, cool, like we're just gonna drive 10 hours to the next show. Thankfully, we're not the headliner, so we don't have to load at 1 or noon or whatever it is, But there were a lot of times that we were late and we'd throw and go, and this fucking poor tour managers for Deftones, I'm sure, like, it was Bobby Schneider, who was like a fucking legend, did like Metallica and Rush and shit, and another cat who I forgot his name, but I mean, I'm sure Bobby was like having a heart attack half the time because we were half the time we were just throwing going because we couldn't get it together, just like we were all just like 25-year-old kids who we just didn't give a fuck, and I gave more of a fuck than anybody else, and I didn't really give a fuck, so it was, but I was in charge of the whole thing, so I was trying to keep it all together. But, we got through, and, to their credit, Fall of Troy dudes are still touring to this day, so they're doing great.